This is presentation 1 for CYBR 4220 Server System Security, entitled Operating Systems and Firewalls. We'll be going over Windows Server 2019, Ubuntu 20 LTS, Windows Firewall, and IP tables. Windows Server 2019 was developed for maximum compatibility with Windows 10. Uses the foundation of Windows Server 2016. It's got a number of improvements. Some include, under the security umbrella, the Advanced Threat Protection. Advanced Threat Protection is preventative and post-detection investigative response feature to Windows Defender. It offers about 9 primary security features and capabilities. Just a couple of them are attack surface reduction, reduces the overall attack surface of the system through hardware isolation application control. Applications are no longer considered trustworthy by default, similar to what you do with Linux. When you first set up a server, you put deny on everything, and only trusted applications are allowed to run. Endpoint detection and response. Advanced threat protection groups related attacks and incidents. This type of aggregation makes it easier for security professionals to prioritize, investigate, and respond to threats, like we do with risk management. We often take similar threats and group them together. And then a secure score. Advanced Threat Protection uses a security score to rate the current security configuration. Prescriptive guidance is given to help reduce professionals to improve the security score. It's kind of like Conduro does for Linux, where it takes a proactive approach to looking through your system and giving you guidance on what's the things that can do better. Exploit Guard is also one of the new security improvements, which is a set of host intrusion prevention capabilities, including network protection, controlled folder access, and a set of configurable mitigations for vulnerability exploits that's set to replace the Microsoft's Enhanced Mitigation Experience Toolkit. And when got a bunch of other ones, but those are just the ones we're going to go over now. System Insights, which is a predictive analytics. It's a new feature, brings local predictive analytic capabilities natively, which is already integrated into the server instead of having to add it in later. These predictive capabilities are each backed by a machine learning model. It's focused on providing insight in the functioning of servers and helping reduce the operational expense by being more proactive, because traditionally we've always been reactive. So every server and all cybersec is trying to move towards more proactive, because you can save a lot more money for your client and make it's easier to try to shut down as many avenues as you can before you go too far with the system, as opposed to trying to make them up. Now, give enough time, every system is going to be broken, but having a predictive analytic with a machine learning model backup does go a long way to being more proactive. And they've also included a browser-based management tool, which is the Windows Admin Center. It lets you manage your Windows server with no Azure or cloud dependencies. It's really useful for managing servers on private networks that aren't connected to the internet, because a lot of businesses, specifically small and medium enterprises, don't always need all their applications, servers, and tools connected to the internet, and so and it's safer if they don't, but you need something to manage those, and this provides a good solution where it can be configured to manage offline or online servers. And it utilizes the Windows Admin Center Gateway installed on Windows Server domain joined Windows. The gateway manages servers by using remote PowerShell and WIM over WinRM. As far as hardening tips for Windows Server 2019 goes, one of the biggest ones is just maintaining the user access control. I know in Windows 7 I hated that thing, because it came up for every single thing I want to do. Every time I want to make any little change. Played a lot of games, especially when I was in the military. When Windows 7 was out, I was deployed a lot. Always had a computer with games, and even doesn't matter what I did, if I wanted to change something, reinstall something, even some games had updates, it would pop up that access control. And sometimes it was, if I wasn't paying attention, I looked away, I could come back an hour later and it still wasn't updated because I hadn't clicked OK on the user access control. But now, being a cybersecurity student and starting to learn, understand, especially when it comes to servers, how important it is to have that user access control enabled. Keep security patches and updates current on a consistent review timeline. That just means you want to install the updates and patches as soon as you can, but you also need to have a review timeline, whether it be once a month, once a quarter. I wouldn't do more than once a quarter. I prefer once a month, if not once a week for small enterprises when you have the time. But to review, make sure you're in compliance, make sure the changes hadn't changed, to review the patches that have been installed, and make sure those patches didn't bring additional vulnerabilities that didn't need to be patched. So review process is very, very important. Minimize extra installations, Java, Firefox, Netflix, WhatsApp, unless you absolutely have to have them to run a portion of the business. There are a lot of businesses, especially when international clients in China or Philippines or Indonesia, that use WhatsApp as their primary communications tools. Even over Teams or Skype, WhatsApp is their big communication tool, professionally, socially. And if you're going to be working those markets, you have to adjust those markets. So unfortunately, you may have to have certain people have those installed, but try to minimize and have as few installations on a system as you can. Less installations, less open ports, less everything. And then always ensure roles are enabled using the principle of least privilege. You want any user to only have access to what they absolutely need to perform their job functions or whatever function they've been assigned. No more. Anytime you give somebody, more privilege, that's more vulnerability you have to manage. So let's try to keep it low. Windows Firewall, also called Windows Defender, has a lot of the same features as Windows Server with a couple more. It uses the advanced threat protections integrated with that. So we've already covered that, and as much as I'm going to at this point in time to save time for everything else I have to go over. It does have its own built-in antivirus. Plenty of companies and plenty of people, I have my own antivirus choice. I mean, you've got McAfee, Norton, Kaspersky, any choice, but it's good for smaller enterprise, medium enterprise that either aren't comfortable with or can't afford to go for a large additional antivirus. So any antivirus is always a good antivirus to have. Even having multiple layers is always good. It's got. I want to go back real quick to the advanced threat protection and the post-incident measures. Post-incident measures are just as important as detection and proactive steps. Getting the hows, whos, and whys of any incident, a breach, attempted breach, is important for making a case, making remediations and corrections to configurations or privileges, and it has to be a priority. No system will ever have a 0% risk factor. My risk management professor, Dr. Shingle Mehmet, spent years developing a way to quantify risk instead of qualify it. And he hammered it that no system will ever have a 0%. So we have to evolve as cybersecurity professionals, as threats evolve, using the tools, and we can only do this through post-instance action, information gathering, and making changes. Going back to the list, Windows Firewalls has network awareness, and net awareness that it applies settings appropriate to the types of network to which it is connected. It kind of figures out what type of network it's connected to, and then tweaks settings appropriately, because if you have a trusted internal network, there's a different set of security rules that can apply to that versus a host versus some spam website. So it's always good to have some like I said, a proactive awareness of your system there. Security automations. A lot of cybersecurity is going to security automation. Windows Defender is starting to get into it. It's got host-based, Windows Firewall is host-based with two-way traffic filtering, which blocks network traffic in and out of a local device. Previously, firewalls were based on blocking everything coming in, and they didn't think about things going out. once something is in your system, or somebody, a physical person gets on your system, makes a mistake, doesn't know what they're doing, or is an offensive actor, you want to make sure you're blocking stuff going out that doesn't need to go out. And Windows Firewall is also integrated with Exploit Guard. Covered that previously, so we'll continue on from here. Hardening tips for Windows Firewall include utilizing local administration password solutions. It's a simplified, it's a password manager basically that tries to stop lateral escalation where, certain systems, certain administrators put the one admin password or username password combination for pretty much all their systems. So what this does is, it uses a time-based password reset to automatically update and store a password in a secure application on the server. You can set it for, every 7 days, 90 days, 30 days, and it'll automatically reset that password, change that password, store it somewhere else that only people that need to access that information can. Disable Windows 10 automatic login. It's never good from a security standpoint to ever have an automatic login on anything. I don't care what it is. There always needs to be a validation of whoever's using the system. So always disable that. Credential Guard and Exploit Guard, make sure those enabled. Disable remote access unless it's absolutely necessary to perform some job function. Remote access is there's too many links in the chain there that can be intercepted, interrupted, or poisoned to allow for more openings or backdoors. So always disable that when you can. Ensure a stable backup schedule. Always have a way to schedule to back up your files. And then ensure user accounts are controlled by system admins, initialized only with individual permissions necessary. This goes back to principle of least privilege. Only individual permissions, individual users and accounts only need to access what they need to access to do their job. These are the sources I used for the Windows Server and the Windows Firewall. I'm going and posting them here if you want to look through them. These are specific to the Windows Server. Next slide will be for the Windows Firewall. And these are the sources I cited for Windows Firewall where I dug up most of my information from. So give you a few minutes to look through, write them down, whatever you need to do to copy them down for yourself. Okay, Ubuntu Server 20 LTS. I realize I probably said LES earlier, or it sounded like it, but it's supposed to be LTS. Guaranteed support until 2025. That's real important when it comes to enterprise servers and firewalls. Even at home, you want something that's stable, you can count on, that's going to be supported a long time. You don't have to change all the time and then reconfigure. You want something that's got a long release schedule. So CentOS used to be like the go-to, but since they didn't shut down, they discontinued it and went to CentOS Stream. Ubuntu Server is kind of taking that spot. So Ubuntu in general, both server and just Ubuntu is starting to take CentOS spot as the long release schedule go-to. Comes with a live installer with the option to update to check for updates on boot up, which is always good. It kind of takes away the necessity of thinking, did I check for updates? You still want a review schedule, which we'll go over when it comes to hardening, but again, it's always good to have, especially if you have multiple users on multiple stations, that it will do it automatically. SSH two-factor authentication. This is hardware based that necessitates having a piece of hardware or device or an app installed on your phone or something like that for authentication. A lot of MMOs have gone to two-factor authentication. They try to incentivize No Star Wars, The Old Republic, and World of Warcraft. Both try to incentivize their users to using a two-factor authentication through a key or rotating algorithm, which just increases the factor because those they have so many logins that it's hard to secure them all. So it comes with WireGuard VPN, which is a kernel space VPN, including the distro. VPNs, of course, they're almost kind of becoming a buzzword nowadays in cybersecurity, but that doesn't decrease their importance. And masking where you're coming from, encapsulating and tunneling. So for having direct connections from point A to point, well, semi-direct through VPN, but more secured connections. And also the less information you give offensive actors, or just any kind of, if you have to use Chrome or somebody has cookies enabled, the less information you can give them, the better. And it's got a more resilient bootloader using multi-disk writing instead of just a single disk. Hardening tips for Ubuntu Server 20 LTS. First, ensure your root account possesses a user ID of 0, which is the highest level access. I've included a couple of commands. I have not tried these yet. These are the closest ones I could find. My command line, my ability with command line is still developing, so I will be trying these. I'm sure that they'll fail, but at least they're a good starting point. Check for empty passwords on accounts and disabled, because when you first start accounts with some distros, or if you don't have things quite configured right, you can have empty accounts, empty passwords, more accounts, empty passwords, more weaknesses. It only takes one of those to kind of start to open up your system. Ensure auto updates are enabled, which again, it takes away that, did I update? Still want to have a review schedule to make sure, but this helps lighten that load a little bit. Now, the bad side of that is you need to check those updates, and you also need to review those updates to make sure those updates don't need updates and didn't open any additional patches, any backdoors, anything like that. Disable root login, specify SSH login only necessary users. Again, back to principle of least privilege. I harp on that a lot, but it's important. And root login needs to be severely controlled. Even my limited understanding knows that root login in wrong hands can be devastating to any system. And then change your default SSH port. Everybody has SSH 20, I think it's port 22. Try to make it some really high number and random, so that, not random to you, but a random collection numbers. This is an example, but I wouldn't use that exact port. But having another random port would be great. IP tables. It's a utility program that allows a sysadmin to configure IP packet filtering for the Linux kernel. Filters are organized into tables that then have rule chains. Chains of rules basically determine what needs to be done with the packet. And you build the chains one rule at a time. So basically performs it. IP tables kind of perform the same task as Windows Defenders, but for Linux. And there's a lot of ideas and theories that go across, automation, proactive scanning of your systems and trying to provide guidance like Honduro does. Now the filtering is based on tables, chains, rules, and targets. Make rules, put them into chains. Packets are put into tables of where they're identified, and targets are what needs to be done with them. Default tables: filter table, network access, translation, mangle, and raw. Hardening tips for IP tables. Again, like I said, my command of command line is still developing, but I did find some very useful commands through IP tables distro documentation. So first thing is turn off receiving of all. When you first up, you're going to have to adjust these settings as you develop your server, because you have turn off receiving of all foreign packets to begin with. That's not an endpoint. That's a start point. It's a foundation point. You're going to have to you may have to open up receiving of foreign packets through your rules chains, your tables, by identifying where they're coming from and what they're used for. And if you're working with an enterprise, or any kind of file sharing, you're going to have foreign packets that have to be received. But to begin with, when you first start, turn them all off until you get your rules set. Set deny all default policies of input, forward, and output. Your targets. Found a command for that. Block null packets. Null packets can lead to DDoS attacks. They just go ahead and block them for now, unless you need to have them on. Force a send packet check, and then log unidentified traffic. That goes back to that post incident. This is kind of pre-incident, post incident of information gathering, remediation, making cases, having as much information as you can. It allows you to make better judgments and configurations going forward. So it's not so much thing that's going to make an immediate hardening difference when you first set your server, but it is something that going forward will help you harden as you go along, especially if you have a repeat identified traffic. You can kind of figure out where they're targeting, where they're going, what kind of methods they're using for getting in, and start cutting off those avenues. These are my sources cited for the Ubuntu Server 20 LTS, just the server itself. I got a lot of them just from the Ubuntu website. The Focal Fossa was a wiki that is from the Focal Fossa, so I put that more. I give that a higher priority than usual. Just a wiki article. I'm not a big fan of wiki, but even those that place, like a wiki like that, can give you links to where they got their information, which gives you better sources. IP tables, I got the majority of my information from NetFilter, IP tables, the documentation, a couple other places, but Ubuntu website from the Ubuntu wiki that they maintain has some hardening and some IP table information as well. So just some time. I know this is a long list, so feel free to pause, stop, whatever you need to do. Other than that, I thank you for the time, the attention, and I'll see you in the next presentation.